The sand hit the dome at 400 km/h, and Kalen's left eye membrane snapped shut from the vibration alone. He opened it again. Below him, through the reinforced observation glass 800 meters above the test floor, the shifting dunes of Icarus moved like something alive. The storm had been running for 6 hours and 11 minutes. 55 cadets had entered the qualification zone at 600 standard. 17 remained. The display in front of Kalen showed Cadet 18 sitting up. She was small. Even at 800 meters through 3 layers of blastrated glass, she looked wrong for the environment, wrong in a way he couldn't log into any category his system recognized. The amber light on his display board had been flashing for 4 hours and 32 minutes. Not red, amber. The color the system used when it had data, but no framework to put it in. She peeled something from her face. The adhesive side was black. Kalen's throat produced a sound at 14 Hz, his baseline stress chirp, the frequency he'd maintained since 612. He hadn't noticed it change. He noticed now that it had climbed higher than that, much higher. He looked at his vocal readout. It said 22 Hz. It said 3 microfractures in his left crystalline cord. He looked back at the glass. Myra folded the black strip carefully, put it in her pocket, stood up. The Miss Vari supervisor to his left had 4 stomach chambers, and all 4 had stopped moving 11 minutes ago. No shelter deployed, no extraction ping sent, no biometric flag in the red zone. 17 cadets out of 55. She was the only one who hadn't asked to leave. The part that still keeps me up at night. She never looked worried, not once. The sound of the lift arriving at 5:57 standard was ordinary. Kalen had logged 642 pretest observations from this deck. He knew what cadets looked like stepping off a lift before a Class 9 qualification. Most of them walked fast. The ones who had studied the Icarus data walked slower, which was worse. It meant they understood what they were walking into and had decided to come anyway. A few stopped at the door and had to be cleared by staff. He ran his calibration sequence. Wind sensors tracking, biometric arrays synced, camera alignment holding across all 32 external units, everything within normal parameters. The phosphor green display panels ran in a column along the left wall. Each panel tracked one set of biometric data. Heart rate, core temperature, cortisol, respiration, oxygen saturation. At 600, all 55 columns were green. By 618, the first 6 had shifted to yellow. Kalen's throat emitted a steady 14 Hz flutter, normal for pre-surge monitoring. The sound was below human hearing range, but he felt it in his sternum, a small vibration that told him his body was paying attention even when his mind was still logging routine data. The wind outside hit 380 km/h at 6:01, within normal Class 9 parameters. Cadet 18 was the last off the lift. Kalen pulled her file before she reached the chamber entrance. It loaded in 0.3 seconds. His display placed it in the upper right corner, standard position for late arrival flagged cadets. Name Myra, homeworld designation Earth, classification Tier 4 Sentinel Omnivore. He read the subcategories. No natural armor. No venom production. Thermal variance tolerance, 12 degrees Celsius. The file noted that her species had no documented chemical defense mechanisms, no biological pressure resistance beyond standard atmospheric range, and no heat sink capacity above basic mammalian parameters. The Academy had accepted her as a diversity placement. Tier 4 species filled 34% of commission track quota slots. He had seen 3 Tier 4 cadets complete a Class 9 qualification in his 6 years on this deck. 2 had made it through with full equipment deployment and extraction-level biometric stress the entire way. 1 had been medical cleared at the 2-hour mark with a fractured left tibia from shelter anchor failure. She was 5 feet and 3 inches tall. Her ponytail was pulled tight, which left the back of her neck exposed to the environment, a detail his observation log flagged automatically under physical vulnerability markers. She carried nothing he could see. Or rather, she carried one thing. Wrapped around her left middle finger was a small roll of white tape. Kalen's database identified it in 0.8 seconds. Adhesive cotton cloth. Tensile strength, 22 newtons per centimeter. Last industrial application, approximately 12,000 years prior. The entry was filed under obsolete medical supplies with a single note. Civilian athletic use, pre-synthesis era. He logged it under personal item, non-equipment. It didn't occur to him to flag it further. The chamber below had 54 cadets moving with purpose. Kalen watched them the way he always did, column by column on the biometric display, cross-referenced with camera feed. 4 Threxian cadets were in the northwest quadrant. locking their carapace seams. The Threxian species had articulated heat-resistant plating that could sustain 70 degrees C surface contact for up to 9 hours before fracture. At 380 km/h wind, they were rated for 18-hour survival with minimal equipment. Even from 800 meters, through the camera feed, Kalen could see the fine lines running along the junction between their neck plates and upper dorsal shells. The early stress marks, not dangerous yet, but there. 3 Belvroni in the central zone were already running membrane diagnostics. Their translucent filtration skin could expand to triple its resting surface area and filter particulate down to 8 microns. The Acaris environment ran 45-micron silicate particles at 4.1 kilograms per cubic meter density. Belvroni were well within their range. In the east quadrant, a group of 4 Qualeri were doing something Kalen recognized from prior qualification cycles. The smallest of the group had moved to the center. The other 3 had pressed close, their thermal-sharing membranes pulsing orange. They were transferring heat mass, compressing the smallest member's body temperature by absorbing 8.2 kilograms of distributed warmth across the group. Kalen noted it in the log. Qualeri thermal cannibalization was permitted under qualification rules as long as all parties remained conscious and signaled voluntary participation. The smallest one's biometrics showed elevated cortisol but steady heart rate. Voluntary. 15 cadets had already tapped out via extraction ping before the first hour was done. One of them was a Velhari named Das, 3rd year, high marks in field assessment, gold-rated equipment pack. He'd trained for Class 9 conditions for 8 months. His extraction ping came in at 6:41, 41 minutes in. His biometrics showed a heart rate of 188 and a core temperature drop of 1 degrees C. He was shaking when the retrieval drone reached him. Kalen logged the biometrics and didn't note the name. He noted the name now, reading it back. Das, gold-rated, gone in 41 minutes. The wind hit 392 km/h at 6:48. Cadet 18, Myra, stood at the chamber entrance for 90 seconds without moving. Kalen watched her on camera 7. She wasn't scanning the environment. She wasn't checking her equipment. She was looking up, which meant she was looking at the ceiling of the open-air qualification zone, which was the sky. The sky above Acaris during a Class 9 storm was the color of old rust, solid with particulate. No light getting through except a flat amber glow that his instruments registered as 0.003% atmospheric moisture. After 90 seconds, she said something. His audio pickup registered it. 7 words in standard, clear enough to transcribe despite 392 km/h wind ambient. Is the humidity always this low? The Misvari supervisor to Kalen's left had 4 translated output ports, and all 4 registered a confidence score of 97% on the behavior tag they produced. The tag read, confusion, non-threat, query, non-functional context. Kalen's throat chirped at 16 Hz. He didn't know why. She walked 12 meters into the chamber, moving against the wind without leaning into it, just walking, the way a person walks to a destination they've already decided on. She stopped at a shallow depression between 2 dune ridges where the wind broke at a slightly lower angle. She sat cross-legged on the sand. The surface temperature was 67 degrees C. She did not deploy shelter. Kalen checked her biometric column. Heart rate, 68 beats per minute. Respiration, 12 per minute. Cortisol, baseline. He checked it again. Baseline. She unwrapped the tape from her finger. He watched her pull 18 centimeters of it free from the roll, tear it with her teeth, and fold it twice, then again, into a square roughly 4 centimeters across. She held it up for a moment. She placed it over her mouth and nose, pressing the edges down along her jaw and cheekbones. Then she lay down on the sand. Her eyes closed. The Misvari supervisor's translator output updated. Behavioral designation, sleeping. Confidence, 97%. Kalen's throat reached 19 Hz, the highest reading he had logged in 6 years on this deck. He had not reached 19 Hz during the Class 8 qualification 2 cycles ago when a Belvroni cadet had a membrane rupture at the 3-hour mark. He was at 19 Hz watching a Tier 4 cadet lie down in an open silicate storm and close her eyes. The wind outside hit 412 km/h. 3 Threxian shelters in the northwest quadrant collapsed within 4 minutes of each other. The first one folded inward on its anchor points, and Kalen watched the Threxian inside roll out and hit 67 degrees C sand with the side of his face before getting his arms under him. The cadet signaled extraction 18 seconds later. 2 more Threxian extraction pings followed within the next 6 minutes. They came, they signaled, they left. Kalen watched Myra's biometric column. Heart rate 68, respiration 12, cortisol baseline. In 3 years of running the Class 9 observation desk, he had seen one cadet maintain baseline cortisol past the first hour. That cadet was a Vithran, a species with a documented neurological suppression system that flatlined stress hormones during extreme environmental exposure. It was their primary survival mechanism. It was also the reason Vithrans had a Tier 2 classification. Myra had no documented suppression system. Her file said 12 degrees Celsius thermal tolerance. Her file said no armor. Her file said diversity placement. Her file said baseline cortisol. At 32 minutes, the silicate wave hit. Wind speed registered 408 km/h on the external sensor array, and Kalen felt it through the deck plating, a low vibration that ran from the floor up through the station chair and into his lower vertebrae. The observation platform was rated to sustain Class 9 wind loads for 140 continuous hours. He had never before felt it move. His data input panel registered 2 additional keystrokes he hadn't made. He deleted them. The smell in the sealed observation deck changed. Something metallic, faintly burned, the recycled air system pressurizing harder against the external differential. It was a smell he associated with system stress. The platform had never smelled like that before. Or rather, it had never smelled like that to him before. He hadn't been paying close enough attention during prior tests. On camera 4, 2 Belvroni in the central zone sent final extraction signals simultaneously. Their filtration membranes had expanded to maximum surface area and were still registering particulate penetration above tolerance. One of them had a secondary membrane rupture, a small one, the kind that healed, but the pain signal it produced was logged as moderate to severe, and the cadet made the correct call. Gone in 32 minutes. Below, in the open expanse, a sand berm was forming against Myra's windward side. 2 centimeters of particulate accumulation along her left arm and shoulder. Her biometric display showed her core temperature at 36, 8 degrees C. A 0, 3 degrees C rise from baseline in 32 minutes of 67 degrees C surface contact and 408 km/h wind. Kalen ran the expected calculation his system produced automatically for Tier 4 species. Predicted core temperature at this point in exposure, 38, 9 degrees C minimum, with hypothermic inflection beginning at the 40-minute mark as the ambient temperature dropped. Her tape filter had collected 0.7 grams of silicate particulate. His system logged it. The tape was rated at 0% efficiency against particles below 200 microns. Akara's silicate averaged 45 microns. His system logged that too. He looked at the 2 entries sitting next to each other in his data log. He did not have a column in his log for discrepancy. He created one. The 3 Qualari observers stationed at the far end of the observation deck had not spoken since 6:41. There were 18 eye stalks between them, and all 18 had been pointed at the audiovisual feed from camera 7 Myra's position for the past 20 minutes. Their thermal sharing membrane was pulsing orange in a pattern Kalen associated with high cognitive load. He had seen the same pattern during academic review sessions when a data problem didn't resolve cleanly. The Misvari supervisor ran a standard mid-test system query at 7:09. Routine. She performed it every 30 minutes. Kalen watched her pour a second fluid ration into one of her stomach chambers, a routine refuel between observations, the kind of small break she took every long test cycle. The fluid was pale amber. She capped the container and set it aside. Then she sent the query about Cadet 18. The priority level she assigned was 1. Kalen had been on this deck for 6 years and had never seen a mid-test system query filed at Priority 1. Priority 1 was for medical emergencies, equipment failures, and security breaches. The central database response time was 11 seconds. The response read, no reclassification available, species Earth-human, no natural protection against silicate abrasion, no explanation. The Misvari supervisor's translator output produced nothing for 47 seconds after the response came in. The wind hit 432 km/h. No armor, no venom, no explanation. At the 47-minute mark, Kalen's display board shifted the color of Myra's environmental flag. It had been red since 6:03, the standard designation for a Tier 4 cadet in a Class 9 zone. At 6:47, it had shifted to amber, the color the system used for anomalous readings that didn't fit existing parameters. He had assumed it would shift back to red as her biometrics degraded. He had been waiting for that shift for 47 minutes. At 6:47, the flag shifted to amber. It stayed amber. His display showed her rolling onto her side in the shallow depression. The sand berm along her left flank had grown to 11 centimeters. She had moved with the storm's rhythm instead of against it, pressing her back into the berm and reducing her wind-exposed surface area by what his system calculated as approximately 31%. His system noted this as passive wind management behavior, unclassified. Heart rate 66 beats per minute. That was lower than when she'd walked into the chamber. The thermal imaging overlay activated automatically when the ambient temperature dropped to 41 degrees C. 14 cadets in the surrounding zone registered hypothermic signatures, core temperatures between 31 degrees C and 33 degrees C, below safe threshold. Their biometric columns had shifted from yellow to red to the gray banding that meant the system was preparing extraction override. Myra's thermal signature showed core temperature, 37, 1 degrees C, stable. Variance from initial baseline, 0, 4 degrees C across 6 hours of exposure, during which the ambient temperature had swung 26 degrees, the wind had hit 432 km/h, and 2.3 grams of silicate particulate at 4.1 kilograms per cubic meter density had hammered every exposed surface in the qualification zone. The tape had collected 2.3 grams of what should have been inside her lungs. Kaelin's throat hit 22 Hz. He felt it as pain, a sharp, clean ache in his crystalline cords, the kind that meant the vibration was producing microdamage. He had read about 22 Hz in an occupational health document 7 years ago. It said, "Do not sustain vocal output at 22 Hz. Crystalline cord fractures at this frequency are progressive and may result in permanent alteration of baseline chirp signature." He didn't stop. He logged data through it. His vocal readout said 3 microfractures had formed in his left cord. He logged that too in the discrepancy column because it seemed like the right place. The Qualari observers had still not spoken. 18 eye stalks, all on camera 7. Then the one on the far left, the oldest of the 3, the one with secondary membrane pigmentation that meant senior observation rank, turned toward the audio feed and said something in Qualari. The translator rendered it slowly, the way it did with low-frequency Qualari vocalizations. They don't have a word for it either. The other 2 Qualari did not respond. Kaelin looked at the senior observer. The senior observer had turned back to camera 7 before the translation finished printing. Kaelin stared at the translated line for a long moment. They don't have a word for it either. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know what it was. He had a database full of species classifications and a priority 1 query that had come back with no explanation, and a Tier 4 cadet sleeping under 432 km/h of silicate wind. And now he had a senior Qualari observer who was apparently aware of something that predated this conversation. He wanted to ask, he didn't. He looked back at the display. Her heart rate was 66. Her respiration was 12. The storm had been running for just over 6 hours, and in the qualification zone below, under 11 centimeters of sand berm and a 4-centimeter square of cotton cloth, last manufactured 12,000 years ago, Cadet 18 from Earth was doing something his entire institutional framework had no column for. Waiting. 1170. Claude responded. The translated line was still on Kaelin's screen when the storm peaked. The translated line was still on Kaelin's screen when the storm peaked. They don't have a word for it either. He had left it there, sitting below his data log, because he didn't know what column to put it in. The senior Qualari observer had gone back to watching camera 7 and hadn't spoken again. The other 2 had never spoken at all. 18 eye stalks, all pointed at one small figure under 11 centimeters of sand, and the only thing the most senior of them had offered was a sentence that raised more questions than anything the central database had returned. Kaelin pulled up the Qualari observer's credentials on a secondary screen. 41 years of academy service, prior postings, Class 7 qualification monitoring on Drevash, Class 8 on Fen Myra Prime, 3 cycles of Class 9 on Akaris. The observer had seen more Class 9 tests than anyone else on this deck. He had said they don't have a word for it either, past tense. Either meaning another species had encountered this before and had also failed to name it. Kaelin's log had no column for that. He left the line where it was and turned back to the display. The wind held at 432 km/h for another 40 minutes. Kaelin watched the columns. Gray banding spread through the biometric display like a slow tide, 1 cadet, then 3, then 7 requesting extraction override as the system flagged their core temperatures below safe threshold. The gray columns meant the cadet could no longer make the decision themselves. The system made it for them. 14 cadets pulled via extraction override in the final 40-minute peak, not by choice. The platform made the call and sent the drones. He watched each one come up. Most of them were motionless when the drones reached them. One Threxian cadet was conscious enough to grab the retrieval arm and had to be talked through releasing it. Kalen logged the biometrics on each one without logging names. Then he stopped, went back, and added the names. He wasn't sure why. It seemed like the right thing to do. Myra's column stayed amber. Heart rate 66, respiration 12, core temperature 37, 1 degrees C. The sand berm along her left side had reached 11 centimeters and then held, her body having found a configuration that let the storm move around it rather than through it. The tape filter had collected particulate steadily. His system had stopped trying to flag the tape as insufficient at the 2-hour mark when the flagging system ran out of categories to file the alert under. The discrepancy column in his log was now 43 entries long. At 5 hours and 44 minutes, the wind began to drop. Not sharply. Class 9 storms on Icarus didn't end cleanly. They fell in stages, 432 to 390, then a hold, then 390 to 310. Another hold, then a long sustained drop to the 80 km/h range that signaled the qualification window closing. The process took about 27 minutes from first drop to official end. Kalen had watched this drop 642 times. He knew exactly what it looked like. He watched the meter fall and found that his throat had gone quiet. The 22Hz chirp, which had been running for 4 hours and 11 minutes, stopped. Not gradually. It just stopped. He became aware of the silence in his own chest, a stillness where the vibration had been, and he realized he hadn't noticed how loud it was until it wasn't there. His vocal readout still showed 3 microfractures. They didn't go away when the frequency stopped. He looked at the display. Myra hadn't moved. At 6 hours and 11 minutes, the storm collapsed. Wind speed dropped to 80 km/h in 90 seconds. Visibility returned, first to 2 kilometers, then 6, then the full 12 as the particulate cloud settled. The phosphor green panels on his left wall shifted their ambient color as the external light changed, the rust-colored sky clearing, a pale, flat light coming through. His thermal overlay updated. 17 cadets. 17 remained standing or lying or crouching in the qualification zone, out of 55. He had known the number before the final count finished. He had been watching it decrease for 6 hours. 17. Myra sat up. The sand berm along her left side collapsed as she moved, spilling in a low wave across the ground. She reached up and took hold of the tape at the corner of her jaw, peeled it back slowly, working each edge loose before pulling. The adhesive side came away black, not gray. Black loaded past visible saturation with silicate particulate. Kalen's camera system automatically calculated the mass. 2.3 grams. A layer of fine dark powder caked solid against the cotton fibers. The tape had a rated efficiency of 0% against 45 micron particles. His system noted the discrepancy, entry 44, and then stopped generating a discrepancy alert because the alert had nowhere to go. She folded the tape, 3 folds precise, the adhesive side tucked inward. She pressed it flat with her thumb and put it in her pocket. Stood up, retied her ponytail, 1 motion, 2 seconds unhurried. Walked toward the extraction point. The Miss Vari supervisor's 4 stomach chambers had been still since 7:12. They did not resume movement. The 3 Qualari observers stood without speaking. All 18 eye stalks tracked Myra's path across the qualification zone floor until she passed below camera range. Then they held position, pointing at the empty ground where she had been lying. Kalen looked at his data log. He had 44 entries in the discrepancy column. He looked at the biometric readout one more time, heart rate 68, the slight rise that came from standing after a long time prone. Respiration 14, a small increase also from standing. Core temperature 37, 3 degrees C. The entire variance across 6 hours and 11 minutes of Class 9 exposure was 0, 4 degrees C. He typed the summary line into the observation record. Human endurance anomaly plus 22% above Threxian baseline. Equipment deployed, 0. Extraction signals sent, 0. Biometric flags above yellow threshold, 0. Respiratory filter, adhesive cotton cloth, obsolete civilian supply, silicate collection, 2.3 grams at 99.3% efficiency in 400 km/h environment. Rated efficiency of filter at relevant particle size, 0%. He looked at the last 2 lines sitting next to each other. He didn't add anything. There was nothing to add that the numbers didn't already say. There was no word for it. There was no column for it. There was no reclassification pending that would resolve it. There was just the number, 99.3%, sitting next to 0%, and a Tier 4 cadet with her ponytail retied, walking out of a Class 9 qualification zone on a planet that should have killed her in the first hour. 17 cadets, 17 out of 55. She was the only one who hadn't asked to leave. She was the only one who hadn't deployed shelter. She was the only one who hadn't gone into the yellow zone. She was the only one who had taken a nap. Kalen stayed at his station until 1840 Standard, 3 hours after the qualification zone cleared. He ran the data review. He checked his camera logs. He filed the biometric summary with the standard post-qualification report system, which generated an automatic priority flag on Cadet 18's entry and routed it to the Academy Qualification Board's review queue. He watched the routing confirmation appear on his screen. Then he sat for a long time and looked at the translated line still sitting at the bottom of his data log. They don't have a word for it either. He pulled up the Senior Qualary Observer's contact profile. He looked at it for a while. He closed it without sending a message. The question he wanted to ask, which species, and when, and what happened, was not a question he could put in an official message routed through the Academy system. He knew that the way he knew most things about how the Academy worked, without being told directly through accumulated observation. He logged off at 1840 and walked back to his assigned quarters through the lower corridor, and his chirp, when he tested it in the quiet of the hallway, came out broken. Not painfully, just wrong. The note that should have been a clean 14 Hz came out fractured, split between two frequencies that didn't quite resolve. A sound that didn't match any species standard vocal signature his system could categorize. He would find out later from a medical officer that the 3 microfractures had already begun to scar over, that the scarring would hold, that his cords would function, but that the scar tissue changed the resonance, that the clean 14 Hz chirp he had produced every day for 31 years was gone, that what came out now would register on Academy maintenance sensors as equipment noise. He would find that out later. Right now he walked back to his quarters and did not test the chirp again. 3 days after the qualification cycle, the Academy Qualification Board convened a closed session. No cadets were present. No statement was issued. The session ran for 8 hours and 12 minutes, which Kalen knew because the session room was 2 floors below his station, and the environmental control logs showed continuous occupancy from 800 to 1612 Standard. At 3:47, the following morning, the Academy training manual updated. Kalen's system flagged the update automatically. He had a standing alert set for any changes to qualification protocols in his monitored specialties. He read the new entry before his morning calibration sequence. Section 94, subsection C, line 12. No human cadets shall be left unsupervised during environmental stress tests, pending tier reclassification. He read it 3 times. No announcement, no press release, no public name on the case. The change just appeared the way institutional corrections always appeared, quietly, at 3:47 when the Academy's public-facing systems were in their lowest traffic window. As if the timing was chosen deliberately. As if someone understood that the right moment to alter something fundamental was when no one was watching. He saved a copy of the original Section 94, subsection C, line 12 as it had read before 3:47. He wasn't sure why. It seemed like the right thing to do. The Miss Vari supervisor submitted a transfer request to Orbital Logistics 4 days after the session. It was approved within 6 hours, faster than standard processing. The Belvroni test coordinator submitted a resignation without comment. No replacement was announced for either position during the next qualification cycle. They left, they didn't explain, they were just gone. 8 months passed. Kalen's vocal cords healed into their new shape. The medical officer had told him the process would take about 6 months. It took 8. He tested the chirp periodically, the way you test a healed injury, not because you expect it to hurt, but because you want to know what you have now. What came out was workable, functional, his own in the sense that it came from his own cords. But it registered wrong on any external sensor, calibrated to his species standard frequency range. The Academy's environmental monitoring system had flagged his vocal signature as anomalous twice in 6 months. Both times a maintenance crew had checked the ambient sensors in his section of the building and found nothing wrong with the equipment. Both times they had logged the anomalous reading as unexplained and closed the ticket. He had not told anyone that the noise was him. On the 241st day after the Icarus Class 9 qualification, Kalen had not been counting. He found the date later when he checked his station logs. He walked the Academy Museum's lower corridor for the first time. He had no particular reason to go. He had passed the entrance to the lower corridor many times and had never gone in. That cycle he had a rest day and found himself walking without a destination, which was unusual for him. He walked through the corridor entrance and followed the row numbers. Row 11, row 12, row 13. The amber preservation lighting was set to 80 lumens, which was low enough to feel dim and warm at the same time. The cases on either side held objects behind glass, small things, mostly tools, fragments, items that had made it into the permanent record for reasons that weren't always immediately clear from looking at them. Row 14, Case 1, Case 2, Case 3. A small square of white tape rested on black velvet. The adhesive side faced up. Dark gray particles still clung to the cotton fibers, not cleaned, not treated, preserved exactly as retrieved. The preservation case held the particulate in suspension. 2.3 grams of acarus silicate, still embedded in a 4-centimeter square of cotton cloth rated at 0% efficiency for particles of its size. A single plaque read, Class of Survival Artifact, Designation, Respiratory Filter, Improvised. Species of Origin, Earth-Human, Tier 4, Reclassification Pending. Extraction Site, Acarus Class 9 Sandstorm Qualification, Cycle 47. Note, no artificial bonding agents, no nanofiltration, adhesive cotton cloth. Effectiveness rating in 400 km/H silicate environment, 99.3%. Kalen read the plaque twice. Reclassification pending. 8 months later, still pending. He had checked the central database 2 weeks prior on an unrelated administrative task, and the entry for Earth-Human had still read. Tier 4 Sentinel Omnivore, reclassification status. Open, no resolution timeline. The system had been attempting to find a new tier for the species for 8 months and had not found one that fit. No warning, no new tier, no explanation. He looked at the tape for a long time. It was smaller than he remembered. On camera 7, in the qualification zone, it had seemed significant in some way he couldn't quantify. Here it was 4 centimeters of cotton cloth on black velvet under 80 lumen amber light, and it was still the same object, and it was still the same size it had always been. He thought about the question he had never sent to the senior Qualari observer, about the species that had encountered this before, about what it meant that they also had no word for it. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a planet where 5'3" omnivores slept through extinction events. The tape was just the evidence. He stood at Case 3 until the amber lights shifted to their lower overnight setting. He walked out. The corridor stayed empty for the rest of the cycle.